1. Little backstory and preface. I love Reddit, as we all do. So many things I've learned and been turned on to by complete strangers with great hearts on the internet. I really believe one can gain so much insight and beneficial knowledge from other people if we'll all just take the time to listen and learn from each other. It's been great. That being said, I've really started getting into the nootropic supplements, nutritional forums after finding out about a few genetic mutations I have that have enlightened me as to why I've always been overweight. Despite genuine efforts to be healthy, I've had lots of non-major continual health issues such as constant tension headaches, off and on bouts of, thankfully, shallow depression, much higher anxiety within the last 5 years, low levels of energy, and a host of other things my mainstream doctors have just scoffed at as normal or pushed me to treat symptomatically with pharmaceuticals, which I really hate unless absolutely necessary. Just a lot of feeling highly uncomfortable in my own body, with seemingly no way to fix it or improve the quality of my own health life. I digress. Basically, I've been doing tons of individual research, testing different vitamins, minerals, amino acids, supplements, etc., especially the ones that seem to get raving reviews on Reddit. Recently ordered tianeptine sodium powder, and it's made a huge difference in my life. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically a tricyclic antidepressant that is 100% legal as of now at least, as a supplement in the US that acts pretty differently than any other I've come across, especially approved by the FDA and marketed by big pharma industries. For those of you who know what it is and have researched or taken it, yes, I'm completely aware of the high addiction potential, the abuse potential, etc. As I am overweight to an extent, 25-year-old female, 5'6", 220 pounds, I do take a higher than normal dose. But I am very cautious when it comes to addictive substances, as I'm apparently genetically predisposed to a higher addiction potential, as well as have a ton of it in my own family, sadly. It's very hard, has destroyed a lot of relationships and lives in my family, and I hate it. So I'm monitoring it closely. I have benefited greatly so far from this supplement, but do not plan on taking it forever. I'm working on other aspects of my genetics, lifestyle, and overall health in order to erase the reason for taking it, because unfortunately, the way I see it right now, I'm just doing what the contemporary MDs do. Treat the symptom, not the root of the problem. But it's made an immediate difference as of now, so I can even take the steps I need to in order to get on the road to really healing my body. So here's the F-up. Yesterday morning I overslept for work. I'll spare the details. I was just rushing around in the morning to try to get out of the door and speed off to work, as I live in a rural area and have a 20-minute drive to work every day. I woke up 3 minutes after I was supposed to be there. Well, I didn't have time to do my usual morning dosing of tianeptine among other vitamins and minerals, so I grabbed the whole little baggie of it that it comes in, stuffed it in my pocket, and was out the door. I did my dose at work in the bathroom just to avoid any weird looks or questions or skepticism. I know. I sound like an addict to an extent. Just don't think people gotta be all up in my business all the time, though. Everything was fine, but I was still running behind, so I put it back into my pocket and forgot to put it in my purse later and into my locker. So, a few hours later, I actually had to use the restroom. Side note, whenever I go to the bathroom, I empty all my pockets into the counter so nothing falls onto the ground or into the toilet. I've had my cell phone fall in, pens, notes, rings, lots of things ruined over this. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Well, I guess this little baggie of white powder either fell out onto the floor, or I left it on the sink counter or something. I didn't notice it was gone at all. So around 4 I was getting ready to leave work for the day. My best friend of 18 plus years that I just happened to also work with comes to the back to say bye and chat for a second. She mentions something about the police being on their way. Real casually, like she knew what was going on and why. So I said, "What? Why?" And she said, "No one told you? Someone found a little baggie with white powder in it in the bathroom." So she told someone else, and she took it to our boss, and they called the cops because they think it was some customer or person I've never heard of. I don't even remember who she said. My heart dropped, and I was like, oh my god, that's my little baggie of white powder. So she looked at me like she was blushing. You're on drugs? So I quickly explained that it was basically a supplement, not drugs. First thought, I wasn't going to say anything and was just going to leave. But then I figured they'd look at the cameras to see if they could identify who'd been in the bathroom that day, what times, etc. I mean, I knew they'd test it and obviously find that it wasn't drugs. But testing the substance or identifying whose it was, etc., I had no idea what order they'd go in with it all. Plus, I didn't want someone else to get any negative consequences, however small they'd really be, because of my stupidity or silence. So, needless to say, I went and told my boss. At first he looked super sketched out and like, what the hell? But that changed pretty quickly into an intense everybody deep belly laughing at me, cracking jokes and telling me I'll never live this down. At first he said we better let the police come in and test it just to make sure they didn't think anything sketchy was going on. But then he called the dispatcher and said, it's fine, don't come, we figured it out. It's an employee's dietary supplement. 2. This story culminated a few hours ago. My grandfather passed on Sunday, April 1st, after a wonderful 90-year run. I was fortunate enough to have the honor of holding his hand as he took his final breath. It was emotionally powerful, and I gained a lot of closure at that moment. 2 nights later, a girl I'd known for a handful of years unfortunately rolled her car and was ejected from the vehicle and died. She was young, had kids, and it was a terrible loss felt by many throughout the community. I was by no means her closest friend, but we knew each other quite well, and I'm very close with one of her best friends. It has been a hell of a week, filled with picking up relatives at the airport, getting fitted for a suit, meals with extended family and such. Plus trying to spend time with my friend who was struggling with a lot of the loss of her friend. I've been running non-stop, it feels like. And I am pretty exhausted both physically and emotionally. Yesterday afternoon, after my grandfather's viewing, I hurried to the tailor, picked up my suit, hung it up at my apartment and headed to a nearby bar for the memorial and wake for my friend. I tried to pace myself and stuck to Guinness as the night wore on, knowing that my grandfather's funeral was this morning. As the crowd dispersed, it was a Sunday night, and many had to work today. It came down to only her closest friends and myself remaining. At this point, the shots started flowing more freely, and I stopped thinking about how I had some pretty big responsibilities in the morning. One of the mourners I'd never met before was extremely attractive and alone, and we spent the tail end of the evening getting to know each other. So I offered that she could come back to my place when we left the bar, since I lived much closer, and she accepted. Once we were back at my apartment, we continued to imbibe, listened to a few records, and shared stories of the friend we lost. I somewhat remember making Alfredo sauce from scratch at some point, boiling some noodles and sharing a late meal with her before setting her up with a blanket and pillows on my couch and heading to my own bed. From checking through my text history, this was around 5 a.m. when I texted another friend that, "Oh shit, I gotta get up in 2 hours." At 10:12 a.m., I noticed my head hurting and look at my phone in my hand as I open my eyes. It hits me. The services started at 10, and I was supposed to be at my parents' house by 9. I yell, "Fuck!" as I jump out of bed and go straight to the shower. I take the fastest shower I have ever taken, and in my hurrying walk into my kitchen naked, at which point I remember someone is asleep on my couch. Luckily she was still asleep, otherwise it could have been an even worse morning than it already was. I was able to get to the cemetery a few minutes before the processional, at which point every family member I've ever met, plus some, systematically shot me the nastiest glare ever. I try to keep conversations to a distance, where no one can smell the alcohol still in my breath. But if you've had a nasty hangover or know someone who has, you know that it was a futile effort. Everyone was verbally very understanding, but the look of disappointment in their eyes was palpable. After the fully military ceremony, we headed back to the mortuary for a meal. I socialized there as much as possible, trying to make up for my massive embarrassment, and feel like I'm making ground at being forgiven by the family for failing at my pallbearer duties. Then the food from the luncheon hit the Alfredo from the night before, which was sitting in a soup of Guinness and shots, and I had zero option but to hurry to the men's room. I head into the only stall and proceed to clog the toilet with the single rankest shit I have ever taken in my 40-odd years on the planet. It was massive in both girth and length, and smelled like it crawled out of the ass of the crypt keeper himself. I flushed as many times as I dared for fear of flooding the bathroom, to no avail. That shit monster had claimed his throne and wasn't giving up easily. I hung my head in shame for the second time today, as I left that cloud of nasal pain, rejoined my family, and finished my meal. Luckily, no one went into the men's room for the remainder of my time there. So hopefully, whoever finds the shit monster is prepared to handle that challenge better than I could today. 3. So I live with 2 roommates. They're Indonesian brothers and I'm Australian. We live in Canada. Their mum has been staying with us the past week, visiting from Indonesia. With her, she brought a shit ton of my absolute favourite chocolate, Kit Kats. But these aren't just your regular run-of-the-mill Kit Kats. She brought exotic flavours, ranging from the subtle creaminess of cheesecake Kit Kat to the rich tang of Shinshu apple. Now obviously these Kit Kats aren't mine to enjoy, but I am somewhat of a Kit Kat connoisseur, and having the temptation of creamy chocolate with a crunchy texture, which in my opinion is more satisfying than a good fuck, in the house is bloody torture. So being the morally depraved and scheming individual that I am, I decided that if one Kit Kat was missing, they would not notice. I mean, surely if the mum saw, she would think it was either of her 2 sons. So I crept to the fridge while they were upstairs asleep, slinking by without sound, with such technique that even Catwoman would be applauding in admiration. I made my way to the fridge. I gripped the door and pulled it open, the refreshing cold and dull yellow light of the fridge surrounding me. As if to invite me further into its depths, I reached in and pulled out the white box which held the cheesecake Kit Kats. Delicately and painstakingly opening it and pulling from within a glorious creation of man. The cheesecake Kit Kat now safely in my hands, I replaced the box in its exact position and shut the fridge door. I slowly unwrapped the Kit Kat, savoring the sight of its smooth, creamy nakedness. Unable to control myself, I ripped off the rest of its wrapping and pushed the chocolate into my mouth. As soon as its cold chocolate taste hit my tongue, goosebumps were traveling down my body. The first bite could only be described as pure, unviolated ecstasy. I needed to bury the evidence, however. So while I was busy slowly chewing the Kit Kat and savoring its delicious taste, I reached into the garbage bin and buried the wrapper under some of the rubbish inside. I withdrew my hand and went back to watching Netflix upstairs. I was distracted by the taste of the Kit Kat and my show. Been watching Rapture, great series so far, definitely recommend. But it came to my attention there was a strange white cream on my finger. I studied it. It looked like melted cheesecake Kit Kat. I sniffed it, and no foul odor assaulted my senses, so I thought all was well, just a bit of Kit Kat residue. So naturally, I licked it. Immediately I knew this was not the remnants of Kit Kat I had so sinfully stolen. This was something else altogether. It had this strange taste, like slightly off milk. Not unpleasant, but certainly not good either. My brow furrowed in confusion as I tried to puzzle out what it was I had just so hastily licked. Then it hit me. This was the hand I had plunged into the rubbish to hide the evidence of my crime. I ran to the bathroom and began to claw at my tongue, throwing water down my throat and hawking up spit from as far back as I could manage. I still have no clue what the fuck I just ate, but there is no doubt in my mind that it was not meant to be consumed, considering it was in the garbage bin. Hopefully my health remains unscathed. 4. I've been an auto mechanic for about 10 years now, and recently, about 5 months now, I've been working at a wrecking yard. For the layman, a wrecking yard is a place that buys written off or just beyond repair vehicles and parts them out. Think chop shop, but without the irritating illegality. My specific job is to go into the yard, yes, I work outside all day, and look for specific parts on vehicles that customers are looking for, and when necessary, remove that part from the vehicle. To set the stage, I live in northern Canada, and it's been a longer than usual winter with more snow than I've seen in at least 15 years. It's now gotten to the point of, oh for God's sake, just go the fuck away already. Add that I've just gotten over the flu and I'm still pretty achy, intermittent headaches, basically just not feeling 100%. As a final ingredient, the vehicle I'm working on was owned by a not so fastidious person. There's garbage everywhere. This mixed stew of terribleness makes for a very cranky me. First item on the list this morning, radio antenna and attached wiring out of a Ford Ranger. Sounds simple enough. But that wire actually runs behind the dash, so a time-consuming job that requires disassembling a good portion of the dash. I start plugging away, sitting in the passenger side of the small pickup, fairly routine work, for a person with all their faculties, that is. Working in the cramped atmosphere, I'm finding it difficult to keep a handle on my tools. Working in gloves doesn't help. I drop a socket behind the dash. Grumble, I retrieve it. I drop the damn socket again. Grumble, russin. I search through the garbage to find it again. Third time's the charm, I guess. I drop the socket again. This time it gets trapped inside a piece of the dash. Goddamn mother effing cock-sucking dick licker! I beat on the dash in an attempt to dislodge the socket. I eventually succeed, but my already short fuse has now burned down to a tiny fraction of what it was. Search through the garbage again. In the process, I find the wheel lock key. Wikipedia excerpt. In countries where the theft of alloy wheels is a serious problem, locking nuts, or bolts as applicable, are available, or already fitted by the vehicle manufacturer, which require a special adapter, key, between the nut and the wrench to fit and remove. Protocol is to keep the key in case someone wants to buy the wheels later on. So I have the key in my hand, and go to stand up, cracking my head on the door jamb. It fucking hurts! Fuse just ran out. Without thinking, I throw the rather heavy for its size key at the truck in a fit of rage, because it's obviously the truck's fault. A split second later, I hear the smash of broken glass. A rather sobering sound, I must say. I look to my left and see the sight. God damn it. I begrudgingly get out of the truck and walk around the front of it to see the other side of my fuck-up. Ugh. Better find the wheel key, still need that. I search the area. Wait, why is there tinted glass shards here? That window wasn't tinted. A sudden realization washes over me. I look to my right to the vehicle that is parked right beside the one I just unintentionally damaged. Son of a bitch! 5. My mom and stepdad went out of town this weekend, which they do every few weeks. This leaves me a house to myself, but also makes me responsible to feed all the animals. We have 4 dogs and a pig. All house-trained and all that jazz. So after a long weekend of playing Fortnite until 4 AM every night, and drinking my stepdad's beer, they are supposed to get home around 3 or 4. I wake up bright and early today, around 10:30, and start the feeding process. The process starts with giving the pig, Olive is her name, her bowl of food in the laundry room because she's a pig and will eat all the dog's food. She's also kind of an asshole, but she's pretty cute, so we keep her around. Most of our dogs are getting old and have multiple different medical issues, so they each need like a bunch of pills every day as well. Fast forward to when all the dogs are done eating. I pick up the bowls and go let Olive out of the laundry room. But when I go to open the door, It only opens about an inch or two. Turns out I put my longboard back at a bad angle last time I used it, and it fell over when I went in to give her her food, and was now sitting halfway between the dryer and wall and in front of the door. I push on the door a little harder and it will not move. Now, the only other way into the laundry room is through the garage. But the only way into the garage is with a garage door opener, which is in my mom's car, which is in the garage. The other opener was in my stepdad's car, which they took out of town. I don't keep one in my car since it stays in the driveway because it doesn't deserve to sleep in the garage. Another important thing about Olive is that she does not like to be in the laundry room once she has finished her food, which takes her about 17 seconds. So at this point, she is squealing up a storm and banging on the door very loudly. As I write this, she has been in the laundry room for about an hour, and my mom and stepdad are on their way home, but won't be back for a few more hours. Olive is still squealing very loudly. I will update as things progress. Edit. She has been freed! Thanks everyone for the suggestions. It took me a while, but I used a spatula to actually lift the board up. Coat hangers were not strong enough. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 70. I think the person in story number 2, I think it was, the one about the funeral, I don't think they should feel too bad about turning up a little late after a night of drinking, especially not after the time they've been having. And it could have been worse, because I remember when I was at my grandfather's funeral, and one of my cousins showed up, in handcuffs, with a police officer on either side. Yeah. And in regards to the fella who had the glass breaking incident in the wreckers yard, I've actually had a similar thing happen to myself, and a few months back it was. As you guys know, I've not been feeling my best lately, and I was especially bad just after Christmas time. And I was making dinner, or was going to make dinner. I decided, okay, I'm gonna cook some chicken breasts. I'll have that with potatoes and vegetables, and that'll be my dinner for today. So I went and I grabbed the bag of chicken breasts, and it turns out the wrong thing had been picked up. Wasn't what I wanted, and that's all there was. And I was in a bit of a mood, kind of on the edge, and that was just the last thing to push me over it. And I had a pot in my hand at the time to fill with water and put these things in. And so when I realised that's what it was, I threw the pot to the side in a fit of rage, not looking where I threw it, and suddenly I hear and I look over to see that I've broken the porthole glass in my washing machine, completely shattered. So when I eventually calmed down, I went online onto eBay. I think I tried Amazon as well, but ultimately I went to eBay to see how much it would cost to buy a new piece of glass to replace that. Much too expensive. So eventually I thought, okay, right, how much would a second-hand piece cost if I can even find one for that model? And I searched, and I was very, very lucky. I found one for a fraction of the price of what the glass would have been. I think it was almost a third of the price to buy just the glass. I found the whole door assembly for that washing machine. And I was very lucky that it was there in 4 days, and took a couple of minutes to fit, so that certainly saved me quite a bit of money on having to buy a new washing machine, which would have been pretty much the only other option if I couldn't have replaced the glass. And it's working fine now, it's been fine ever since. Also, before I go, it really annoys me that everywhere in the world seems to get better Kit Kats than we do. I mean, I like Kit Kats, but we don't have the huge variety that some places do. I mean, if we're lucky, you'll get the regular ones, then once in a while they might have white chocolate, rarely, which I like, or you might occasionally get orange and mint flavoured. And that's it. Rest of the world, they've got green tea, they've got wasabi, they've got cheesecake flavoured. I'm making myself hungry now. Okay, I'm going to go. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.